key partners in. But last week, as I said, I did my summit in Toronto, which was dedicated to agencies and agencies learning from each other. And we had a handful of people on this group who were at the call. Nihar actually did a fantastic presentation on building a retention department. I just got the recordings, the raw recordings back today, and they're chopping it up. So it should be ready towards the end of the week. And then I'll email it around for anybody who wants to catch up on some of the great talks. But on top of the presentations, we also had a few workshops running along the side. So we had Ecommerce there, we had Klaviyo, Rewind. We did a little delivery workshop with my private mastermind delivery coach, Mike from Irish Titan. And also Mo from Gadget came and did a workshop on Gadget. And it was so, everybody loved it. Like everybody had a gadget boner after that call or after that workshop. So I said to Mo, if you want to come on and do it with the Roundtable, which is open to more people and it's done virtually, and then I can refer back to it afterwards. And of course, Mo said yes. So here we are. So anybody who's doing like dev stuff, app stuff, code stuff, sloppy code, nasty code, all of that annoying stuff, that's really where Mo kind of steps in. So that's my big intro, Mo. It's all like, you can only get better from here.
Yeah, thanks. No, that was great. I think what I'll do is I'll share my screen and just kind of like talk through the story of why we started Gadgetum, where it's going, the types of use cases agencies are currently using the product for, and why. And I noticed there's kind of a mix of very technical and non-technical people here in attendance. So I believe that the best way to illustrate the value of Gadget is to show it. That said, a demo is quite technical. So if we have time, I'll just do that at the tail end. And anyone who doesn't want to look at me build a Shopify app end-to-end in 10 minutes can leave. And anyone who's a little bit interested and okay with looking at a tiny bit of code can stick around and watch me build an app. So let me start there. I'll just share my screen. I might not go through everything. I don't want to bore you guys with an entire presentation. But let me just start by introducing myself, the company, and why we started this. So this is my first time using Canva. We're going to find out if I know how to use Canva. Can everyone see my screen? If someone could just say yes, because I can't see you folks anymore.
Perfect.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm Mo. I am the founder and CEO of Gadget, and I think the best place to start is to explain why we started this company and what it does. So I've worked in tech my entire career for about 20 years. I used to run a large department at Shopify where I built, along with my team, Shopify Payments, ShopPay, the financial services team. It's called Shopify Money. So checkout API, ShopPay, Shopify Capital. Those were my babies. My co-founder, Harry Brundage, was head of core engineering at Shopify. And our other co-founder used to run the entire data science team. We left in 2018 for various reasons and regrouped because Harry reached out to both of us and basically said something that felt outlandish but true. He said that most software being built on the web today is being built 2 to 3 times as slow as it should be. And the reason for it is the tools we use don't really capture the patterns of the things we're building in the world today. So we use the same tools, a low-level text editor, a database, some low-level language, and we keep building the same kind of looking buildings effectively. It's like the analogy I would use is it's like construction workers show up to a construction site with sand, even though they know they're going to build a brick building, and then they spend the first 3 months building bricks, and they finally start on the brick building. That is the state of software development today. Most of the code software developers write is not unique, is not actually special, has nothing to do with the problem they're solving. It's repetitive boilerplate, and it's a result of disparate low-level tooling. So what we decided to do is to give a high-level stack to the developer that gives them these really, really, really rich high-level building blocks that actually capture the patterns of web apps today, and therefore allow them to build and scale applications really, really quickly. So that's what inspired us to start Gadget. What Gadget is it is the fastest way to build Shopify apps, custom or public applications. So again, we're talking about apps, not themes. We're not talking about things that do not require, OAuth or scopes or extensions. We're really talking about app development here. The reason agencies typically leverage the product, from the agency owner's perspective, it's pretty simple. With the same amount of staff, you get a lot more done. So your builds go faster, usually 2 to 5 times is what we hear from agencies who've used us for a while. And then there's very little maintenance, both in terms of scaling your application, as well as dealing with Shopify changing the API, which they do every 12 months, but Gadget kind of abstracts all of that and handles it for you. So agency owners use it because they make more money with the same amount of staff. And then the second use case we've really seen for them is a lot of theme agencies have realized the Gadget framework makes app development simple enough that a front-end developer can go full stack. So there's also a set of theme agencies that have actually gone full stack with Gadget without hiring back-end devs. And that's been a second use case as to why agencies adopt us. But ultimately, it's about money for the agency owner. And then for the developer, it's really about spending their time on the code that matters and not all the nonsense that they've written 10 million times in their life. And so you will still, as a developer in Gadget, data model. You will still write business logic in code because that's the fastest and best way to express business logic. But for all the 70% of your code that you've written 10 million times, Gadget abstracts that and gives you a simple user interface to kind of manage all of that. So really the value proposition for the developer is you kind of focus your time on the fun stuff, the higher order thinking, architecture, data modeling, and business logic, and all the CRUD, boilerplate, setup, and infrastructure writes itself. I think I kind of touched on this earlier. I don't really want to dwell on it too much, but there's really 2 reasons why Gadget is fast. Zero setup. Every time you start a project with Gadget, which you'll see in the demo, you basically have all of your infrastructure instantly provisioned for you and a connection to Shopify instantly provisioned for you as well, meaning you don't integrate Shopify. The entire admin API is available to you. Every webhook is available to you, and you have a full environment set up to receive this data from Shopify, which I'll show you in a moment. So zero setup saves you a ton of time on every single project. And then there's a framework that gives you these really high-level building blocks that let you handle things a lot more quickly. Again, the analogy would be instead of building a brick building straight out of sand, we'll give you bricks so you can go a little bit faster. Typical workflow, again, I don't want to get too technical just because of the audience. In Gadget is you kind of define your database schema either by creating tables yourself or connecting to Shopify's tables of data that you care about. You use our framework to quickly define a backend, and usually you're looking at a backend that's about 20 to 30% of the code a typical backend would contain. And that's because the other 70% is our framework. We instantly automatically produce an API and document it for you. And this is a public API, a real web API. And then your developer uses that API to build a front end and host it on Gadget. So this is typically the Gadget workflow. What's special about it is some of these steps are entirely automated and entirely abstracted by us, whereas typically your developer would actually do every single thing from scratch themselves. Bunch of fancy technical terms of useless things developers have done 10 million times in their life and do every single time they build an application, and Gadget takes care of. So if you're familiar with any of these words, tenancy is, when you're building an app for many merchants, you don't want them to see each other's data. You want it to be secure. You want it to be private. You write a bunch of boilerplate code regardless of what you're working on to make this possible. Authentication, hopefully is self-explanatory. Connecting to Shopify requires scopes and permissions, and getting all of that is a bunch of boilerplate work that has nothing to do with what you're building. And a bunch of other stuff that I won't bother boring you folks with. But if any of these, if you're a developer in the audience and these words mean something to you, you do not do these things when you use Gadget, With Gadget, you write business logic and functions, and the rest writes itself. I wanted to show folks a few real-world examples, like typically 2 questions, and I'll pause after this and just take questions and then do the demo afterwards. But typically, a question we get is, well, what type of use cases, and are there some proof points you can show as to like how much complexity this framework can handle? So we've been live for 5-6 months now out of beta. And there's about 300 applications live on Gadget now, largely custom apps, often agencies or really, really big enterprise plus merchants that have in-house developers will use Gadget to build customizations around Shopify to make the product better for themselves. The typical use cases we see there start from, data automations and syncing. Very big Shopify Plus agency. I think the first one in Southeast Asia, Miko. They use Gadget regularly, and one of their biggest use cases is in Southeast Asia. Shopify Markets does not yet exist. And so if you have 5 regional Shopify Plus stores that are actually using the same inventory, you actually have to synchronize the data across all 5 of them. With Gadget, you can kind of spin up a cross-shop product inventory syncing app within a couple of days and make sure that all of your Shopify Plus stores are always in sync. We've seen internal tools being built just to kind of accelerate internal workflows for the merchant. So OneLive is an agency that manages about 1,000 Shopify Plus stores for big bands like Metallica and Kiss. And because they are actually managing 1,000 Shopify Plus stores themselves, they build a lot of tools for automating the management of these stores. And one of them is, how to propagate their shipping rates that they negotiate with shipping providers across 1,000 stores every time the prices change. So they built a simple internal app with an embedded UI and Gadget that now updates the shipping rates of 1,000 Shopify Plus stores very quickly. And you can also go all the way to buyer-facing applications. So I believe this is actually a little GIF of one that is built in Gadget. This is a New Zealand-based Shopify Plus store. What you're looking at is a product customizer. So they sell, GIF paper, and then there's a little customizer where you can show a logo on it, let people change the colors, and then go to cart and make the purchase. This application is actually powered by Gadget. So an example of a custom app with a buyer-facing user interface where there's a UI being shown to the buyer. Custom apps are the bulk of what gets built in Gadget. There are public apps as well, however. There's about 30 or so of them because we only launched public app support recently. The reason I want to show a few of these is just to kind of illustrate the complexity that Gadget can handle. So Show Day, I'll just zoom in a tiny bit. This is their App Store listing. This is an app built in Gadget. It is a video player that shows up on a store with a live, over here I'm kind of hovering, live or pre-recorded video, and there's a checkout link and you make the purchase and there's some analytics. So you can use the Gadget framework to build this entire application. This app is downloaded by thousands of merchants. It's done hundreds of millions of events and webhooks. So both the complexity of the business requirements as well as the throughput of data and the amount of data going through it. I just like to use Show Day to kind of illustrate, like, yeah, the framework can handle scale. On the topic of scale, at risk of sounding a little boastful, I will also just put it out there that Harry and I's lives at Shopify was largely dominated by keeping Shopify Checkout up and running. Shopify Checkout is a monster of throughput in terms of data volume. When Kanye West decides to put his shoes on checkout and 10 million people hit it at the same time, that is a nightmare in terms of infrastructure scaling. Or when Kylie Jenner and her lip kits go on sale and millions of people hit her checkout, that is also a nightmare. The framework we use to power Gadget apps is very similar to the same framework we use to power Shopify Checkout. And so again, hopefully If you believe that we could scale that thing, you believe we can scale whatever you build on our platform that should be an order of magnitude simpler. Other examples, just really quickly, Vigilance, it's a coupon code leak detection. So they scour Honey and Rakuten. They see if your discount codes have been leaked, they alert you, and then they have a quick user interface that lets you like change the discount code or remove it if you don't want it listed on Honey. This app was built in Gadget end-to-end as well. And then finally, another app that's kind of heavily used by a few thousand merchants. It's a ChatGPT content generator for blog posts and product descriptions. There's a UI, there's a back end, there's a front end. The entire thing, this app was actually built in 7 days. We have a running kind of tally for a record holder of who has built the fastest public app in Gadget. These folks are currently the record holder. They started on a Monday and they submitted to the App Store on a Sunday. And they have thousands of merchants already using their app, which is pretty promising. So a few examples of like custom app use cases, public app use cases. And, you know, we can talk about commercial structure. I kind of want to pause and mostly just answer questions for a bit. I can come back to this if you folks are interested, and then we can do a demo as well, which I would really love to do because it's easy to say you can build an app in 10, 15, 20 minutes. It's very different when you show people that you can build an app in 10, 15 minutes and actually run it on a store. So I'll leave those two and maybe take some questions in the meantime. Yes, I don't know if, I have to hit the open queue button, I guess. Did that work?
Yeah, Nihar and Diego, two people would have questions. Nihar, do you want to go first?
Sure, thank you. This sounds awesome, Mo. I'm going to get the recording and share it with our development team. But if I am understanding correctly, because I'm not super technical, but just technical enough to be dangerous, but is this does work for private apps as well as public apps,
yes,
right?
Yes,
and
it does.
If you have multiple stores using the same application, you can use one app in one location for 4 or 5 stores, because that's something that we've run into has been a challenge. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you can link one Gadget project to one API key in your Shopify partner dashboard, or you can link it to 10 and install it 10 times on 10 different stores. Both will work, yes.
You said you guys are hosting it on, you guys host the app on your end, right?
Google Cloud. So the entire stack, the back end. And so, okay, so let me just say that the Gadget framework is magically fast because we have coupled the coding language and the infrastructure together. And so you do have to write the code in our languages, which are JavaScript. So React on the front end, ideally, Node.js on the back end, and there's a database that we give you and manage and scale for you. And everything is on Google Cloud, currently out of Ohio. Next year, geo-distributed across the world. So your app is instantly live across 4 data centers.
It's required, Node is required as well as, and what's the database?
The database is Postgres, but we have a abstraction layer on top that almost makes it feel a bit like MongoDB. So front-end developers find it pretty fun to play with as well.
So it's based off of the mean stack, if I'm not mistaken?
MERN, yes.
I got it. Okay, my bad. I'm not. Okay, appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah. And Nihar, just one clarification. There are ways to decouple from that stack in certain parts. So you can actually say, you know what, I'm going to use Gadget as my back end, and I'll just put my front end somewhere in Vercel or Netlify or Heroku, and I'll write it in whatever language I like and talk to Gadget via API, because the back end and the front end of every Gadget app is separated by a clean, documented public API. You can always choose to decouple from Gadget in that way as well and do a front end in any language anywhere.
Awesome. And would you be willing to do a demo with our dev team, or is that, or somebody else? Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely. So maybe I should, and sorry, I know I'm going to come to you in a moment, Diego, but
take this offline. I'll email you separately. Don't worry.
Well, actually, I think it's worth just mentioning to everyone. So here, let me share my slides. I was going to skip the commercial structure, but everyone is very keen on kind of hearing this, so I'll go through it. There's really two ways agencies use Gadget. We have plans that typically you start on the hobby plan for free, and usually you can get one custom app out for free. And the reason we do that is your developers have to like try Gadget and learn to trust it before you pay us. That's kind of typical for developer products. And then afterwards, if you were kind of committed, the starting plan is $35 for 3 apps with enough hosting included, but you can always buy more. So this is one pricing plan, and these go up. So there's another plan with 500 that gives you a bunch of apps and a bunch of developer seats. Typically, what we have seen is agencies will use this setup if they are doing retainers with their clients. So you buy one of our plans, we give you a nice report of which app consumed how much data and cloud resources, and then you decide how to charge your customers and mark it up in the form of retainers. And what we've also seen and offer is a partner program where for smaller clients, agencies just don't pay us at all. They use Gadget for free. The client pays. So maybe instead of punching your card in, you put the client's credit card in, and actually we just pay you a rev share. So some agencies prefer this model, some agencies prefer the retainer model, and some agencies do both, where their big clients are on retainer, their small clients are on rev share partner program. And to your question, on both of these for agencies, we currently offer pair programming on the first project for free. So your first project, once you have it, you just tell us what it is. We'll just kind of get on a call and build it with your developers, just so they can see how fast it goes compared to their traditional tech stack, and also get a bit of help to learn our framework quickly. So the answer is yes, we do offer pair programming for free on one project. And if you need more, there's support packages you can buy. And I should just preface this. I know the audience here is just agencies. That pricing structure is exclusively for agencies. So if anyone here is a big merchant or a freelancer, I apologize, that does not apply to you. It is just for agencies. Okay, Diego, do you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. So I think one of the questions I had was if you're only planning to support Node.js. Sounds like the answer to that is yes.
I would say for at least another 12 months.
Okay.
And then at some point we have ambitions of making it cross-language, but for the next 12 months, I would be lying to you if I said there'd be anything other than Node.js on the back end. And again, on the front end, you can decouple and do whatever you like.
The other question is, you mentioned something very quickly at the beginning of the call about the API deprecation. So do you guys handle the field deprecation and the 12-month
We do.
upgrade?
We do. I am going to, maybe at the tail end of my demo, I'll show you how an upgrading Gadget works. So what we do is we give you a UI where you can say, take me from this Shopify API version to this other one. Gadget will automatically update everything in your database. We don't touch your code. We just update your database and the webhook processing pipeline. And you just kind of deploy to production if there is no breaking change. So typically 99% of the time, Shopify's API updates don't include breaking changes. You just click a drop down, click a button, you're done. 1% of the time, something Shopify changes, breaks your app.
Some fields change, yeah.
Exactly. So if it's a breaking change, your developers still have to spend a bit of time figuring out how to adjust the code, but usually it's not, and it's 2 clicks in Gadget, and I will demo that for you.
Do you let developer build on unstable?
Not right now,
Okay.
mostly because the integration to Shopify takes time for us, and they keep changing the API during unstable, and it's just not worth the effort of integrating every 2 days.
Okay, cool. Thanks. Super helpful.
No worries. Patty, you are up. Oh, did we lose Patty? She just dropped off. Okay.
Oh, hello?
Oh, there we go.
Hi, sorry, thank you. I think I know, but I just want to confirm. And I don't suppose there's like sort of a self-hosted option if we wanted to,
Self-host.
Mhm.
At the moment, there isn't, and that's really kind of the step change of Gadget. Is like, this is not yet another programming language framework. We actually think that orange has been squeezed to death. This is a framework that couples the language and the infrastructure, and that is what's making Gadget so fast.
Sure.
And because of that, we have not figured out a way to open source this. I think, again, similar to the previous questions, we would love to offer an open source version of Gadget, but that is probably at least a year away, and quite a challenge in terms of how to do what we've done outside of the cloud. So at the moment, you get two environments with every project, development and production. Both of them are running on Google Cloud, and there is no local kind of like, give me the code and let me host it myself option today.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask you a question, Patty?
Sure.
Yeah, I'm curious what use cases come up where you feel the need to self-host, and whether it's driven by some viewpoint within your agency, or if it's driven by the merchant demanding self-hosting as part of the contract with you.
I'm not really sure. It was more of if we have a merchant that would prefer to
Self-host.
not, yeah. Or we have our own private app where we just want to kind of keep our code a little bit more private.
Yep. So the first use case, the answer is we don't have facilities for self-hosted for merchants. The second use case, though, of, I already have an app and I already have all this code, there are folks who use Gadget as middleware. So Gadget basically sits between Shopify and your existing app servers, and it just abstracts the nonsense of Shopify's webhooks and rate limits and API version upgrades and OAuth. But all it does is it just passes data to your server, takes back data, and sends it to Shopify. Some folks have basically ported their apps to Gadget in that manner, where they just want us to abstract Shopify's API, but they don't want to host or rewrite their code using our framework. And so all they do with Gadget is pass data back and forth between Shopify and their existing servers and just get the benefit of the integration abstraction we offer without the rest of the stuff. So you can do that for the second use case you described. The first one, if the merchant demands it, you could still do Gadget as middleware, but the middleware would be on the cloud and not, being hosted by you.
Okay, thank you.
Cool. Any other questions? If so, raise hands, or I guess scream into a mic. And if not,
I have one more question about hosting. So you said it's $35 a month for up to 3 apps.
Yep.
It seemed, but then you said something about hosting and being able to buy more hosting.
Yeah. So what we do in the plans is we include a certain amount of data storage, hosting, and API calls. And typically for agencies building custom apps, the included amount is enough. But public app developers, like Showday's app is installed by 1,300 merchants.
Yeah, that's the use case I was going to ask.
Yeah, so like if your app blows up, which is great news for you, you're going to have to buy more hosting because
that makes sense.
API calls. So it's really a surcharge, but usually agencies that do custom apps don't run into it, with a few exceptions where we had someone build a 5 million order and order line item sync with a ERP system. And yes, if you're doing 5 million events back and forth on a bi-weekly basis, you're probably going to pay a little bit more for Gadget's hosting, because that's a lot of data and API calls.
Yeah. Okay. And webhook subscription, you keep talking about like that you abstract a lot of the nonsense. Do you just subscribe to a bunch of the webhooks with all the fields included, or what are the specifics of that?
I think, Diego, if you're okay, that one is best answered by showing.
Okay.
So cool. Maybe I'll just see if anyone else has a question, and I'll make sure to address that in the demo. Cool. No one else has a question. Let me actually put my money where my mouth is and build, finish, deploy, and use a Shopify app on a Shopify store. And we have a lot of time, so I'm going to go nice and slow and just explain everything I'm doing. If anyone wants to interrupt me, thanks, Nihar. If anyone wants to interrupt me at any point in time, please do so. If I don't see you, it's because I'm sharing my screen, and maybe Rachel can yell at me or something, and I'll catch my attention. So I'm going to build an app, and I'll explain the use case first. I'm going to build a simple app that takes the products in my store. So this is one of my dev stores. I have lots of products. And automatically reads the product description and checks for words that I really care about. And it puts the words in tags so that they can power the storefront search. So I want an automated product tagging application. Let's say this is a Plus store asking for this as a custom app. I'm going to start, build, finish this in front of you in the next 25 minutes. So what do? I go to Gadget right away. And before I get too far, I just want to say that I'm going to do the entire demo from the web portal. When you write code in Gadget, you don't have to use our website. You can use your local computer, your terminal, run a command, and then use your preferred text editor. But again, for this demo, I just want to go fast. So I'm going to use the web editor for everything. We'll do a simple product tagging custom app. As soon as I create a project, Gadget sets everything up. So right now, as soon as this project loaded, I have a Node.js backend and a React front end on Google Cloud and a Postgres database. And I have it ×2. So a development environment, a production environment, and I have 2 URLs that are live on the internet that I can go and look at and see my application in development and in production. So instantly, I have kind of like the core infrastructure setup. The first thing I do is I connect my backend to the data I care about from Shopify. To do that, I don't spend weeks of my life integrating Shopify's admin API. I just go to my partner dashboard. And you can do this with Shopify CLI or manually through your partner dashboard, as I'm about to do myself. Both work. But I'll just say, simple product tagger. And I mark my apps with -dev and -production, and I'll explain why later. But for now, I'm just calling this dev because I'm going to link these API keys to Gadget's development environment. And I'm going to use a different set of API keys from Shopify for my production environment. And that's just my own personal preference because I like to keep things clean. Now, the next question we ask you involves the Gadget framework. So first off, if you are trying to access any data from Shopify, you need API scopes. In my case, I'm doing a product tagging app. So I need some product data. I search for product. I see that Gadget has the read and write scopes for the admin API available. And I say I want both of them. And then the second question is when Gadget's framework kicks in. This API scope called product actually contains data for about 12 to 15 tables. Our framework actually asks you, what tables do you care about? Because what we are going to do is we're going to set up the table for you. We're going to set up the event pipeline, and we're going to make sure your version of the table is always in sync with any store that installs your app. So in my case, I don't actually care about most of these tables. This field called description, I know is in the product table. So I'm just going to say product. Then this is a summary of what Gadget's going to do. Gadget's going to go register for all these webhooks. It's going to create these tables in my Gadget database for me. Some of them we just force you to take, and I'll explain why in a moment. And I just hit confirm. I don't go build tables in a Postgres database, run migrations, and then show up 3 days later with, hey, I have the tables ready. Let's start building an API integration, which could take 7 days itself. I just get it set up for me by Gadget. So what happened is Gadget dropped the product table I care about. And this is our framework here, and I'll just touch on it lightly. The table has fields, like every database table in the world, and the fields are a direct copy of Shopify's product table. So it's a one-to-one match with the Shopify product table. And then what we also do in our framework is every time a table is added to your Gadget backend, we also give you API endpoints for creating, updating, and deleting records in the table. So this is the table. It's empty right now. We give you a way to update data within it, and we wire it up to be triggered by Shopify events. Someone asked a question, so let me go try to answer that real quick.
Yeah,
Yes.
Victor.
Hey, sorry. So you're essentially caching a copy of the product database.
That is in one of our framework concepts. Yes, there's a stateless version as well, where you can just say, I actually don't care to preserve state. I just want to manipulate and move on. I'm going to do this demo in the stateful way, but there is a stateless way as well, if that's what you were curious about.
Yeah, cool. Thank you.
So, and the reason I'll do it in the stateful way is because there's a couple of really, really great advantages that you get for free that I want to talk about. So all I have to do is finish the setup, which just requires me giving Shopify the Gadget development URLs so that it sends the data to the right place. So you just go to your partner dashboard and you replace the example URL Shopify gave you with your Gadget URLs. These can eventually be Vercel, Heroku, Netlify. We don't really care. We just give you 2 URLs to get started in development. And I still haven't written a line of code. I'm just going to go install this app on a store, and it should work.
Sorry to interrupt you there. You're not sharing anymore.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Thank you. That is embarrassing. So all I did was I went to the app setup and I plugged in the Gadget development URLs that were made available to me into my Shopify account so that Shopify sends the data to the Gadget app that I wanted to send the data to. And then what I was going to do next is go install it on a store. I have a store with a ton of products. The one I showed you, this one, I'm just going to close this tab and go and hit install. So this is the merchant experience now. Like you would normally send either a one-time link or it's on the App Store. They click a button, they see this page. They would see your partner name, not ours. They would see your logo and your app name, and then they would see the scopes that you told Gadget to go and fetch for you. And when I hit install, I also get an embedded front end fully set up for me by Gadget. So this is the merchant installing, hypothetically, though it's my development store. This interface you see here is an embedded app. I just didn't have to set it up. Gadget did it for me. And it is powered by a file of code in React that actually changes what this page does. So that's what I mean by zero setup. I have Google Cloud Infrastructure. My database is connected to Shopify and we'll get events and I'll show you. And my front end is set up and I can start designing in React with Polaris. Polaris is already here, as you can see from some of these components. And really what we're trying to do is like get rid of all the bullshit your developers are spending days or weeks doing that has nothing to do with the app. I haven't even started building the app. I'm just connecting things right now. And typically this is a starting point that would take quite a while to get to. So I have an embedded front end. I can use this to build the front end of my app. I want to talk about the back end of it. Gadget is now, my development environment in Gadget is now connected to one store, the store that I just installed. All my webhooks are registered. And what will happen is the Gadget framework, anytime a Shopify event takes place, whether it's a webhook or you fetching historical data, which we call sync, and we give you an API for, we will do what is described here. We will take the data, make sure to store it for the right shop ID so that no one can see each other's data, and we'll save it to your database. That's all we're doing. Nothing special. So presumably if I go to the store and I create a product, some product, some description. Gadget is going to get the webhook, take the webhook, convert it to a record, and store it in this table. And there it is. So now the table has one record, and it was because of the webhook that came in. So that is like webhook processing kind of built in. The second thing I want to talk about is syncing. Syncing is about historical data. Sometimes you're building an app, and like as soon as the merchant installs your app, you need to show them all their products or their product images or the last month of orders. Shopify makes that incredibly difficult to pull in at scale because of their API rate limits. Gadget knows how to handle Shopify's API rate limits really well. And what we do is we abstract all of that and give you an API called sync. And you make one API call to Gadget to fetch as much data as you need from any table for any merchant, and we will go sync it for you. You can do this via API, and it is documented in our API reference, which is here, and I'll talk about this in a second. But when you're doing custom apps, if you're lazy like me, you can also just go back to this page and click this button, and it will go sync every single product and bring it to this table. So my store had about 6,000 products, and you're going to see that this table is now getting really, really big because Gadget's just fetching every single one of them and running them through the framework of, okay, I ran a sync, I got the data, I created records in a table. And now I have 5,000 products. And presumably this might take a couple of minutes depending on whether you're doing millions or 1 or 10. We don't really care. It's just the amount of time it takes might change a bit because of Shopify's API speed. So we give you webhook processing and syncing out of the gate, but the Gadget framework actually lets you hook in and do more. So you can actually teach us how to run additional logic in Node.js, and I'll show you that in a second. And you can also blend in your own custom data. So for me to build my product tagging app, I need like a list of keywords that I'm tagging against. So what I'll probably do is create a table in Gadget where I'm going to store tags or allowed tags. And my staff can contribute new keywords that should automatically tag whenever products are changed. To do that, I click this little button. Similar to the Shopify models, you just give the model a name. So I call it allowed tag. The database table is currently pretty empty. It just contains ID and timestamps. That's kind of useless. I tell Gadget to add a field called keyword. It's a string. I can change the data types and the validations as needed. And again, I still haven't written a line of code. I can go to my Gadget generated API. This is actually produced, built, and documented for each individual project in real time. And I can notice that the allowed tag table somehow magically got a full set of API endpoints that allow me to search, filter, paginate, create, read, update, and delete data from this table in TypeScript, GraphQL, and JavaScript as well. So your API is available to you in GraphQL, in a script tag, which you can use on the Shopify storefront, in React, and in a JavaScript node module. We actually create a node module for every single package, every single project. And you can go npm install this anywhere and talk to your Gadget backend in real time from anywhere on the web. So instantly, apparently, Gadget knew how to create an endpoint that lets me create allowed tags. It has the entire schema documented. And I can say, I want to test it out. So we have a really easy way to test things out in GraphQL. We have a playground. And you can just pass in some data. So I said there was one field called keyword. And I'm just going to pass in the word shoes. This hits that API in real time. And you can see it worked. I got no errors back. And if I go to Gadget now and I look at the table, there's a record. So again, I spent 3 minutes of my life clicking around. I created a Postgres database, a full API for how to fetch and sort and paginate and create data within that table. And I didn't spend a week of my life doing this. I spent 3 minutes. All that is left to do now is teach Gadget that when events come into my product table, I should actually cross-check them against keywords in my allowed tag table. And if those words match, send it to Shopify. And for this part, I apologize, but I don't want to spend 10 minutes writing code in front of you folks. So I will copy, paste, and actually just walk you through it. All you do is, and again, the Gadget framework is accessible locally, so you can use VS Code or your preferred text editor. But in the user interface, you hit this button, we give you a code file. This code file will run as soon as we are done. So on success for the action that is copying data when products are created, you can tell us to do something else. And in my code, what I do is, apologies, I copy pasted the wrong one. Super embarrassing. In my code, all I do is closing a few tabs. Line 1 is very special. It's what really reduces the amount of code your developers write. The entire Gadget API that I showed you in this API reference for your project is instantly available to you through this API object. The record, which in this case is the product that just came in from Shopify, all of the data is available to you under this object. And then there's a couple of other ones that allow you to do console logs and connect to Shopify without ever doing auth. Line 2, all I'm saying is the body, which is the name of the description field in Shopify's API. They call this body. If it has changed, so if the body has changed, chop it up into individual words. That's line 4. Line 7 is kind of special. I use the Gadget API to say, hey, API.allowedTag.findMany. So I'm just using the auto-generated API to go fetch every single word in this table called allowed tag. If the words match, console log statement applying new tags, just so I know that the code worked up until line 9, and that'll show up in the Gadget logs. I'll show you in a second. And then finally, send that tag back to Shopify. I've hard-coded the store name. You don't have to do that if you're building a public app or an app for many merchants. But in this case, I just kind of hard-coded it because, again, I'm lazy. So I am done. The app is built. I can go test it. It will work in development and in production. And as you can see, I kind of did like 5 minutes of clicking around and 15 lines of code. So you can kind of compare what this would feel like to an app build yourself. But let's go test it and prove that this actually works. My expectation is the word shoes. If I put that in the description of any product I create, a few seconds later, the Gadget app will tag the product with the word shoes. So let's go try it out. We go to the product page, add a new product. New product. These are the best shoes you have ever bought. We hit save. The word shoes should show up here in a few seconds. Gadget has a really good log experience as well. So you can actually see what's going on in development. Like I can see, okay, I got a webhook, I'm applying tags, so on and so forth. I have a bit of circular logic in my code that I haven't gotten rid of, which is why it's doing this. But I know it worked because my console log statement is showing. And if I refresh the page in Shopify, shoes, there you go. I automatically tagged the product based on a set of keywords that are given to me by my staff. The only thing left to do in this application is to build an embedded form that a non-technical user can use to add keywords. Because what I did is I went into the Gadget playground and used this kind of programming interface to create the word shoes. But really, probably what you would do is you would go to that page that we give you in your front end folder called Shop Page JSX. This is powering the tagger dev, the development user interface that I showed you, and you would delete pretty much all of this code, and you would design a form. And what's special about the Gadget front end is the Gadget React client is already installed. So this API I showed you is already available to you, and you can read, write, update, delete, whatever you like, paginate, search, and filter data from any of your tables. Polaris is already here. Polaris icons are here. And what you would do here is probably write 20 lines of code to design a nice little form with one field that says keyword and a button that says submit. And your staff can now go add keywords to increase the number of tags that will populate. So I won't do that part because it'll take a little bit of time and we only have 7 minutes. But typically the front end will be, 40 lines of code. Back end you saw was 10 lines of code, bunch of clicking around because most of the work involved in building this application is nonsense boilerplate that is not unique and should not necessarily be written 10 million times. And the net result is if you had sold this contract to a client for $1,000 even, of like, I'm going to build this full app with a front end, a back end, an API that can do all these things. The truth of the matter is someone who is an expert in Gadget can probably build it in like 45 minutes. And that's a new phenomenon we've seen as well, where Gadget agencies have kind of realized that there were a set of projects that felt cost prohibitive, where the client's budget just didn't make sense. And what we're seeing is with Gadget, folks actually engage in these types of projects of like, oh, it's a $600 quick little automation with a form. Not typically worth my while if I have to spin up all my own boilerplate, but if I can do it in Gadget in 20 minutes, yeah, $600 for 20 minutes is not a bad deal. So I built real fast. Everything is serverless, meaning as the data volumes scale, both your code and your database, we scale it for you. The last thing was to go back to Diego's question around, someone's question around API version upgrades. I am going to see if I have an old app. And if not, I think I can somehow simulate. So these are all my Gadget apps in my account. My account will look slightly different from yours just because I have a few additional features turned on. So let me, unfortunately, I don't think I can demo this because I don't have an app on an old API version. But typically the way it works is if you were on an old API version, there would be a red banner right next to this. And you would hit the edit icon and you would be able to change the version with a drop down. But because I'm not on a deprecated API version, Gadget's not letting me do that. But I can maybe share a quick 3-minute video of what that experience looks like with Rachel, and she can share it with you folks if you're interested. I just have to set up an app to be able to demo that, and I don't have one on hand. Apologies. So I'm going to stop there. Like, I built a product tagger, 15 lines of code. I've done VAT validation apps. They're about 45, 50 lines of code. Most custom apps, someone like me can do probably in a day or less. Really complicated custom apps, like some people are rebuilding Octane AI in Gadget in a custom way. Those might take a week or two. And public apps, typically we've seen people start and finish a public app in about a month and max 2 months. So project times we think are at least 2 to 5 times faster. Someone raised their hand, but it is not showing up in my panel. Yes, we do have, okay, Ruslan, there's some questions in here, sick. I just discovered the in-call messages tab where there's a whole conversation going on. So yes, do you have boilerplate for working with Shopify's billing APIs? Gadget actually has lots of templates. Templates are fully functional Gadget apps that cover a specific piece of something agencies really value. So billing examples are common templates. We have usage-based, one-time, free trial. You can just grab our templates, fork them, and use those as starting points. We also started building templates for common use cases agencies get. So we now have a template for a base version of Octane AI. There was a Plus merchant that couldn't use Octane because they were trying to customize the emails with additional data from Klaviyo. And they would fork our base template, add in their own customizations, and just kind of use the custom app. Upsell, cross-sell, we also have custom templates you can fork and edit. And we are adding a couple for syncing Gadget to, or Shopify to Notion, Airtable, or any arbitrary third-party API like a WMS or a CMS. So there's a template for that coming out as well, where you can just fork it, edit it, and ship it. And we'll keep adding more based on feedback. Like anytime 3 agencies share the same use case with us, we'll usually jump in and kind of do a quick template and offer it to everyone for free. I feel like someone else raised their hands, but it's unclear to me who. So
I think Gustavo got a little bit excited and clicked the hands up button because he was so. I'm texting his business partner Lucas on WhatsApp.
It was exactly that. I was just overexcited. I was gonna clap on an emoji, but yeah, amazing presentation, Mo. As a non-technical, founder, I'm just trying to work around and understand everything, but like it's awesome.
Thank you. I think. Oh, there we go. Diego's got a question.
Yeah, one more. I've heard in the past, I think one of your teammates, Riley, talk about some benefits that you put in place that facilitate the review process when you're going through the Shopify listing approval process. What's that exactly?
It basically, no Gadget app has ever failed a Shopify app review for technical reasons. Okay. So you might still fail for the other reasons, like if you put something sketchy in your app listing or you make a claim that your app cures cancer, Shopify is going to reject it. That's not our fault. That's on you. But for technical reasons like CSP issues or the initial load time or any of that nonsense of session token handling or returning a 200 when they send you a webhook within a certain amount of time, no Gadget app has ever failed the Shopify App Store review for technical reasons.
Awesome.
Victor.
Hey, thank you for the presentation.
No worries.
So I had a couple questions. The main one is revolving collaboration for developers, which has been a struggle.
Yeah.
For hosted apps, I have this insane workflow currently. Do you have any solutions for that or anything in place to facilitate collaboration?
So that's a great question. And maybe I can just generalize it a little bit more of like, what is missing from Gadget? So today, Gadget is not source controlled, meaning that the Gadget UI is not source controlled. Your code files, because you can pull them locally, you can always open up a GitHub project and just kind of source control and review code files, and they will sync with Gadget. There's a command you run in your terminal, and all of the files in Gadget and all of the files in your local computer will match each other. And as you change one, the other will change. That gives you the ability to do source control on your code. The truth of the matter is, if you're trying to do source control on the Gadget GUI, we do not have that yet. That is slated to be available probably September this year. So most of the projects people are building in Gadget today are 2 developers, 1, sometimes 3. And usually like back-end devs stay there, front-end devs stay here because it's a little dangerous. But in Q3, we will have native source control for the Gadget user interface and not just the code. I generalized your question, so can I keep going and point out the one other feature that Gadget does not have yet that everyone should know about? Background jobs and queuing. We do not have a native framework concept for background jobs yet. We do have a very easy template to connect Gadget to Google Cloud Tasks or a very simple kind of queuing background job system on the internet for free. We are going to build background jobs in Q4. There are workarounds. Background jobs are actually probably one of the biggest use cases Gadget's used for, which is kind of ironic because we don't actually support it natively. But there are workarounds that still make Gadget really desirable for large data syncing between Shopify and ERP systems. But the native background job feature will be available in Q4. So those are the two things that are really missing right now from the framework: source control, background jobs. One question nobody asked that I'll just ask for you, that everyone typically is thinking but not really saying, is one, how do I know you guys will be around in 5 years as a company, and what happens to all of my applications if you're not? And two, how do I trust you to scale infrastructure? So the second one, I think I've tried to address to the best of my abilities, and really that's just a matter of experience, and I think my co-founder and I have the experience to scale these applications. The first question, how do we know you'll be around? We are well funded. We raised 10 million from Sequoia and Bessemer. We are funded by every single Shopify executive, Toby, Harley. They are all investors and believers in the product. Our view is we will make it as a standalone company. Like, we have 3 years of runway to figure out how to get to our next funding, which is a ton of time in this market. And worst case scenario is probably somebody buys us, and that somebody is probably Shopify. So I like, realistically, it's very unlikely to happen. I cannot give you any definitive answer. I would be lying if I told you I could see time, but it is really unrealistic to expect Gadget to disappear overnight. And if that were to happen, we would just find a way to open source everyone's code and help you self-host it. But hopefully 3 years of runway, 10 million in the bank, every Shopify executive is an investor, and we're seeing enough traction that we don't think that that reality will surface. Okay, I think I answered all of everyone's questions, as well as the ones that weren't asked. Okay, Victor.
Yeah, sorry, I had that second question I mentioned.
Yeah.
I know you mentioned deprecated APIs. I'm sorry if I missed it. Do you have access to developer previews and
Right
stuff?
now, we don't do developer preview because it's just too unstable and it's too much work for us to keep changing the integration. So we always have the latest API version available, usually within 7 to 10 days of when it's announced. So Shopify will probably launch the July 1st API version on July 1st, and it'll be available in Gadget usually by July 10th.
Okay. And okay, so that implies also you currently don't have anything for Shopify functions and extensions.
No, because those are so Shopify functions and extensions are kind of interesting. It's like the client side for Shopify functions and extensions, you always have to open up Shopify CLI and submit anyways.
Mm-hmm.
But then when you get your API keys back, you use those in Gadget to build the rest of the application. So I actually have a good demo that I'll try to send Rachel as well, and you guys can watch. It's me adding a field to the checkout for a European merchant to collect the VAT tax ID, and then server side through Gadget, fetching the data through a webhook, validating it against the VAT validation API, and tagging the order with valid invalid. So I use a hybrid of a checkout UI extension, which I have to use Shopify CLI to submit. There's no way around that. And then I take the API keys and I build the entire app in Gadget, including all the logic for how to fetch the data and validate it and return it to the order. I will include that demo in the email I sent Rachel, and she can share it with you folks.
Cool. Thank you.
Checkout extensions and functions is actually one of the biggest use cases people use Gadget for. The checkout liquid deprecation is forcing a lot of you to do server-side work, whereas previously you could do it all client-side. And so it's actually one of the biggest use cases people use us for, is moving stuff from the client side to the server side. Okay, this was awesome. Thank you so much, Rachel. And I apologize for going over time. Hopefully this was useful, and that's why we went over time. And if not, I am truly sorry.
Very Canadian.
Yeah, very sorry. Sorry for being sorry.
This is awesome. This is so great. This is why I wanted to have you on this call, because I just think it's so valuable, and it's going to live on YouTube now, so I can do lots of promotions through my newsletter and through LinkedIn. So I know that a lot of people are going to want to catch up on this after. So if you send me over the any of the resources you have, and what I'll do is I'll send an email round to the 200 or 300 people that are subscribed to this roundtable, and then include you in the email as well, so they can reach out to you directly. And I'll take 20% of everything.
Of course. I will send that over to you first thing tomorrow morning. And
Perfect.
thank you again for this opportunity. It's great, and I appreciate everyone's time. Thank you for listening to me ramble for an hour.
Perfect. All right. Thanks, Emil.
Take care. Bye.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.